It started very simple, like it was more like an encounter. Like I was allowed to come into the temple last year in May, and I met Master Yenda, the head monk of the warrior monks. And he's a monk, but he's actually also a calligrapher, he's a musician, like you could feel that he's an artist. And so when he met me, I could feel that he was interested in the art form of choreography, and that he was kind of intrigued by what I was doing. And he was like, maybe you could do something with us. We're not dancers, but maybe you could make something with some of the monks of the temple, and we'd be very open to welcome you and let you experiment and explore something with us, because we're very curious and interested in the outside world.
What drew you to Kung Fu in the first place?
I think what's interesting for me in martial arts is the explosiveness. They're really like, there's something about them just being able to burst out, and that's for me was something that I think in my life right now I needed. I needed that kind of release of energy, and at the same time the spiritual side, which is all about meditation, kind of calming down the mind. So the body being able to just express everything in one single shot, in one single hit, is interesting for me. And then the fact of trying to gain an absolute stillness, like being a stone or something, and just letting everything flow over you. Those two, I think, made it appealing. I did want to change kind of like maybe the collective cliches we have about them. But I have that with any style of dance or movement. Where I have that with hip hop too, where I think like you don't have to have a cap and be have kind of a certain style to be a hip hopper. You can go to the essence of the movement, or really do it in another kind of costume or another other clothes, and suddenly it becomes, you read maybe the movement much more. You read the essence of what hip hop could be about, or jazz or ballet or anything really. I like to take off the clothes and put new clothes on. And so with the Kung Fu, I wanted to do the same. I was really determined to kind of bring it to another, to just give it another aesthetic, because I felt sometimes the aesthetic overthrew the Kung Fu. Like sometimes we just see the whole fireworks, but we don't see the essence of it anymore. And I really wanted to go to that. I started talking to Antony Gormley about this project, this idea, and he was straight away interested. Being in the temple, you saw these 200 monks, and like 100 of them are warrior monks, all doing the same movement. And so there's this kind of replication, like as if they're all clones in a way, movement clones. In Antony's work, I find that too, like his own body being replicated at infinity. It just felt right to do this with Antony. We were discussing things about, something that could be used in many ways, and so he came up with this idea of the boxes, and that was the one that it struck straight away, because it reminded me a little bit of when I was a kid and I was playing with Lego, and kind of being able to build and make anything out of anything. And so these blocks suddenly became like a toy, a really big toy that I could bring to China, to the monks, and be like, let's make this together. And then they'd be like, oh yeah, that's beautiful, okay, we'll try. And then, all 16 of them would be working together to make it possible. And then slowly I'd start choreographing the making. So I'd say, it's more nice if you go around there, and if you go do this. And so it was like architecture, and like just playing with really big toys.
Did the stories or the movement ideas come out of the designs from the boxes, the way you were playing with the boxes, or did the Lego building of the boxes serve the ideas of the stories you wanted to tell?
I think it's more, I always work with images first. I think like my natural expression was drawing, so I always kind of go from an image, and the image tells me a story. So slowly I see a story in the image. So in one image you can suddenly see like what's happening within that image. So when I have the skyscrapers and they're just walking, that's one thing, but when they're starting running, it's another, and when they start leaping, it becomes another, and when they go on top of it, it slowly generates for me a sense of story that I then start to link with, how do I go from the skyscrapers to the lotus, or no, maybe I should go from the lotus to the skies. So from small building blocks, from the monks, me, the boxes to the big building blocks, because then the lotus flower also becomes a building block, and the skyscrapers also. So these scenes also have to be built on top of each other to create a piece. So I always go from detail to a performance, to a full performance. Sometimes certain scenes, like the last kung fu scene, it was developed quite early in the process, and I tried to many things, but I felt like this scene is the most profound for me at the end. It made the most sense because it's really cleaning the space, and it just gives room for the kung fu, for the essence of it, and so it kind of demanded to be the end, and then other things demanded to be the beginning. The maze I knew had to be somewhere in the beginning. It didn't make sense to do this at the end. It was something that just fitted as an entrance. Also because I think Dong Dong is very cute when he goes into it, so it kind of makes you be like not prejudiced. You don't see any more monks. You see this little creature going in, and you're straight away into this fantasy world. You're not judging them as being something else than what the image proposes.
Dong Dong and your relationship on stage is extraordinary. When did you decide to use someone so young? Because I know he's 11 now, but he was only 10 when he started.
It was actually a suggestion from Master Yenda. Like, I was working with the boxes and with some of the monks already for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. And then he said, wouldn't you be interested in working with the child monk? Because I think he just saw that box, because in the beginning we were working a lot inside, and doing the kung fu inside is very difficult. And then he said, well, if you have a little monk, he'll be able to do it. He'll be able to do some martial arts inside of the box. So he said, would you like someone? And I'm like, oh, sure. And then so Dong Dong came into the rehearsal room, and it was fascinating to have all those monks being kind of the same size, and then suddenly this really small one who's just as ready as the others. But because he's younger, he's also much less prejudiced. So he's like, in the beginning he was a bit shy, but then I told him, like, you can just, play, and while the others are doing this, just go in. And so he was starting to become creative. And as children are, their full potential is still open, so they can become anything. So when I asked him, oh, can you be a little monkey there? And then you become Buddha, but then you die, and then you go there. And he was like, okay. And he just did it. He wasn't thinking like, why am I Buddha? And why am I a monkey? And why? He just went along with the ideas and just executed them. And from executing them, the meaning came, the meaning of the transformation, and the reasons why these intuitive ideas that I might have had, or projections that I had on him, and also his own intuition, because a lot in the beginning it was me telling him, just do that, and then you go into this and that, but then slowly he started to improvise. And even our duet that we do in the box, it is half improvised, because every day he comes to me and he's like, today, well, he doesn't speak English, but he shows me, like, he does a movement like, I do this, and then you go with your head against me, and then I go there with your foot, and then, so he's guiding me and telling me what to do, which I think is quite fun to as a choreographer, to be like, okay, I'll listen to this 11-year-old who's telling me what the choreography should be.
At the end, when they're actually dancing together to the music, was that strange for them to suddenly be more like dancers in a conventional Western sense?
It's interesting that you see it as a dance sequence, because for them, they're just doing their Kung Fu 11 traditional forms that I kind of, together with the team leader, Huang Jiahao, we worked on. When a movement stopped at, one of the traditional forms, I would say, can you continue in the third traditional form where that movement comes to, because it's a vocabulary, and then you continue from there. So, and then you guys come in and you pick up on that movement, and you go out because you're tired, and because they never do 5 minutes of Kung Fu non-stop. So this was really a big challenge, this last scene for them. The musicians are actually doing a lot of the work, because they are following the monks. So it's not the monks following the music. The monks feed off the energy of the music, but they have their own rhythm, and the musicians are very gifted. Shemon had created a composition called Praying. Actually, the last piece is called Praying, and he didn't know how I was going to use it. So in the beginning, it just was called praying, and it had this theme which was a bit like in music terms you would call it a passacaglia. It's something that just keeps on repeating itself and has many variations, but you always recognize the real pattern that comes back again and again, like a mantra. And so there was something of a prayer inside of this. And when I started using it on this last scene, he then developed it with the musicians to make it more and more climatic, give it a climax, and just building it up towards this last moment when we hit the floor with the fist, and then only the beat keeps going, almost like a bolero or like a heartbeat that keeps on resonating like ripples in the water, that just keeps on going on and on and on because of as a resonance. But it is the musicians really, so they don't see themselves as dancers at all at that moment, at least.
I met Lagby first time after his performance Myth in Antwerp. I found it so amazing, this connection between music and theater and dance in his work. And I was always interested in it, and that's why I got to talk to him. I gave him my music, and what he found interesting in the music was this emotionality and emotions and a little bit of melancholy. And then we got to talk about how he perceives the music in this particular project, because he found monks also very focused, very melancholic in a way, and and the music has something like meditative in it. So we found it might be a good link to bring this kind of music in the martial art world, which is actually not only about fight and kung fu. It's also about relaxation, about meditation, about very moderate emotions, moderate moods. So.
And did you compose as Lagby was making the choreography, or did you give him a score that was independent of what he was doing?
Yeah, that was before, because he's used to work with the music which already exists. So I had to write the score like before, and then we recorded the music in January with the musicians in Antwerp, and he took the music with him to China in February, and then he started to work with the music which already existed. But then, of course, I knew that things will change. And they were changing all the time, and they were even changing here in London.
No, it's up to you pushing it forward, which is.
I thought you wanted faster, happen faster.
Is that possible?
The work was in two phases. First phase was just to write the music, and then to change and to combine all the elements together.
So were you actually changing the order of certain sections in the music?
There was no actually order. I mean, in the beginning there was just separate pieces of music, and then Lagby made the constructions out of the boxes, and then we were like, okay, this music could go with this construction, like with Lotus Flare, for example, we can use this piece of music. Slowly, we had the structure of the music with the piece, and then we were thinking how to even make it more combine, how to combine it more and how to change the music. Should we add some more sounds, more percussion? And so it was still awareness and brainstorm all the time, which was extremely challenging for me, but also very, very, it was an amazing experience to work with Lagby. And
certainly when you're watching the piece, the music sometimes provides a kind of emotional frame for what's going on stage.
Yes, that was the idea. That was the idea, that we bring the emotion, that the music will bring certain emotion which might bring the piece into a different place, For me, this piece is about contradictions, soft and strong, stillness and movements, and many, many different contradictions in this piece. And that's why also when I was composing, and the first I came with the soft, quiet music, and then I was like, okay, I have to break it. I need to, add more percussion. I need to write some powerful music also. So like thinking to balance it as best as possible.
Were you at any point tempted to have more Chinese flavors or instrumentation?
So I didn't want to do anything which is really like, traditional Chinese music, because I don't see that it makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense for me. So, and for me, it's about collaboration. So I wanted to bring something from me, purely from me, for myself.
Obviously, you spent quite a lot of time at the temple too. Did your experiences there influence how the music ended up?
Yeah, of course. It was, that was a starting point for me, actually, to write the music, to start, because we went the first time in October with Larbi, and for 5 days only, but, it was the first time for me in China, and of course the first time in the temple, and then we were introduced to participate in the morning prayers that normally foreign people, they can't really, but because we're like those guests of the temple, and that was really magical moment for me, because they were like using some percussion instruments. They were like praying in this kind of melodiclamation, way, and so there was a soundscape there already, which I could pick up. And then for me, it's like everything is important, like the visual part also, like the landscape, the beautiful mountains around, and of course the presentation of Kung Fu by monks themselves. So all those elements, like I just gathered, and then I filtered in my mind, and then I came back to Antwerp, and I just started to write the score.
At the end of the piece, where they're dancing almost as an ensemble, the musicians are actually having to keep up with the monk's rhythm. Is that difficult?
Of course it's difficult, because I think that was the main challenge for me as a composer, that because they are not dancers and they are not used to work with with the music. So the challenge was to write a score which doesn't really, disturb them, but somehow goes along and easily combines with the movement. Because mainly we take cues from them, but there are certain moments they also take cues from the music. It's constant flowing of energy from their bodies and between the boxes and to us for the music also. So it's like exchanging energy in a way. So that's also very fascinating for me, because I've never done such a thing before. I've never worked with, martial arts. So it's like a new thing for me as a composer, of course.
The thing that attracted me to this project was the combination of Larbi and China, and I guess working with intelligent bodies that had a completely different reason for movement to any contemporary dancer that I might have come across otherwise. I'd already thought about, is it possible to make an evocation of the human condition needing shelter and containment in another way? So I just said, all right, well, let's try and make a box. Let's try and make a box for each person, for each of the monks. This was the proportion that we ended up with, which is basically 3 times longer than they are broad and deep. 60 by 60 by 180. I did think at the beginning that what I was proposing was, in some senses, another way of talking about a collective body, the ability to make something bigger than the individual. I was interested at the beginning in what were the basic formulas of distribution of the blocks. Just that was a stage, and then from the stage, the idea that you could make a wall. A wall that had these 2 sides, one of which, was like a wall, and the other one was like a row of beach huts or sentry boxes or Anyway, I like the wall. I like the stage. I like the when it was flipped. This idea that this became like a pond or something very almost dangerous because it had depth, but you could only walk on certain bits of it, and then it felt like ice. I was very keen early on to make more ambitious rising structures. But in the end, and quite rightly, it was the ability to integrate the various formal distributions of the blocks with the movement. And that's how these quite remarkable sequences came about that were really just about how you might, through doing minimal moves, move from one almost found pattern of distribution to another. And the strange thing was that I never ever thought that the blocks were going to be, as it were, confused with dancers. I mean, not the blocks, the boxes. But it was Larby who was able to somehow insist that that the syntax of the boxes should begin to inform, as it were, the possibility of the dancing. Well, I was worried actually, the first time I went out, because I just thought that the boxes were far too dominant. I had this idea that they would just be, that you would use 4 of these assemblies, maybe the platform, the wall, maybe just a distribution of boxes as a sort of forest of pillars, and maybe the one that I loved most of all, the dormitory, and that they would be constant while the evolution of the dance took place. But in the end, Larby integrated the boxes entirely into the movement, and it was amazing. It was very extraordinary. But what had, in my first visit, been incredibly clumsy, I was terribly aware of how heavy. They weigh 32 kilos, that's not light. The monks they're very physical, but they're quite slight. But it's a tribute to both them and to Larby that they managed, by the end of it, to look like these moves with the boxes were entirely inevitable and smooth. When you see a carving made out of granite or even marble, you think, how on earth did they manage to give form to this intransigent material? And in a sense here, you've got these very boring, very clumsy, very clunky objects, and you think, my God, how did they manage to make these things that are so geometric suddenly have fluidity? I would hate for the work to be seen as simply a reframing of traditional Kung Fu moves, even though it is built out of those as much as it's built out of these blocks. I think it is an investigation of freedom and containment, and simple propositions like the body can be in one place and the mind somewhere else, that the body can be confined, but in some senses the imagination, while being dependent on the body, can go anywhere. So right from the beginning, this tension between, say, the body and the box, the individual and the collective, in some way mind control, whether that be playing with the little models and seeing that play replicated You know, the way you read it can go in two directions. One, you can see this as somehow this Magus is planning what's about to happen while it is happening. Or you can see it as a sort of deposition of the artistic process as a whole, but actually the whole thing is about some ludic activity that through which you discover things that you didn't know simply by observing the way that things fit together. It's never quite clear whether this is a sinister form of control or a game. And it's very interesting then what happens with the character of Dong Dong, the small monk, because it seems at first that it's clear that Labi is in some senses his master, but in the evolution of the dance it becomes clear that actually Dong Dong in some way is also an avatar, is also a translator of things. And when they do their duet in the box, it's completely unclear as to, in a way, who is supporting who is the ground and who is the figure. Anyway, I think all of those uncertainties are a part of what makes this performance intriguing. Suits are very, very important, I think, and that was Labi's insistence, and I think he was absolutely right, that we had to cut through in a way a kind of placid acceptance that these are monks and we're watching them do their stuff. It's another one of my favourite scenes where they're doing what I call the popcorn, which came out of their early morning warm-up exercises. When we were there in March and it was cold, 1 degree or less, they would warm up simply by running from one end of this shed to the other. But after doing that for about 10 minutes, spontaneously, individuals, without any recourse or sign from anyone or sign to each other, would do a head flip, or would do a 360 turn, or would do a somersault. And they had such proprioception and such an awareness of the spatial sort of conditions of each other. In spite of there being no signalling, they never ever crashed. And so you'd have somebody like hanging in the air over here, you'd have somebody else sort of, maybe even with their weapons, with a flail, doing quite a dangerous flail move. And it was just literally like this sort of spontaneous explosion of energy. And when that was translated into the suits, I just thought it was brilliant. The craziness of putting highly active, very, very fast-moving bodies in the straitjacket of a box is one, difficult to take proposition. But then to also put those very, very fast and extraordinarily agile bodies into a sound landscape that is full of plangent European melancholy is another huge risk. And it's a huge tribute to Shimon that it works as well. And I think that counterpoint, somehow we're now used to Chinese martial music being the appropriate accompaniment, or Chinese opera music being the appropriate accompaniment to this sort of kung fu spectacle. And in one very clear mood change, Shimon was able to allow us to look in a completely different way at this body of movement.